Hello, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich begashmis beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Pesach Sheni, the famous holiday which represents that nothing is ever lost. Since Dokken verfallen, everyone gets a second chance. Sometimes we get a third chance, a fourth chance. And Hashem never ends giving us a chance. Today we're going to speak about a subject which is about education and guidance. And obviously, there's always the concept of educating yourself. So it's true in what works for another, works for oneself, what works for oneself, works for another. So today we're going to speak about something which is very broad in life and has supreme relevance, as we'll see. But as usual, we'll start with a prayer. We'll talk about the Parsha. We'll talk about the Perek and Mishnah Oves and Pirkei Oves. And in Mitzvah Hashem, this Tuesday is Lag BaOmer and the connection to Lag BaOmer in Mitzvah Hashem. So we'll start with the prayer. We say this in prayer every single day. Be'avaseilom avinu avarachmon amerachim rachim no leheinu v'seim b'libeinu bino lo'ovinu le'askil l'shmel lumeid l'lamed Lishmer Alasis Ulakayim is called Divis Almuterasecha Biyavo. So there's a lot of things over here. We say, our Father, merciful Father who is compassionate, have mercy on us and grant our heart understanding to comprehend and to discern, to perceive, to learn, and to teach. So every single one of us is saying, Lilmaid Ulalamed, to learn and to teach. Every single one of us is a teacher. Whether it means Vishinantam Levanecha, you have to teach your children, or it means for those of us who are teachers, we're in leadership positions, we're teachers, we're rabbis, etc. So in this week's Parshas Emor, it's very well known. The pasuk says, "Vayemer Hashem al Moshe." Hashem spoke to Moshe, "Emor el hakoyanim b'nei Aaron v'amarta aleim." By the way, I spoke about this once before last year, but what we're going to speak about today is a bit different. Anyways, the pasuk says, Hashem said to Moshe, "Say to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, and you shall say to them." So the question is, it seems to be redundant, a double lashon. Emor el Kohanim, you should speak to the Kohanim. V'amarta aleim, you should say. Why does it say twice? Say. So Rashi says, Emor v'amarta lahazik doilim alaktanim. The Torah uses the redundant wording of say, followed by, and you shall say, to enjoin adults with regards to minors. So by the way, over here, it doesn't only mean, seemingly, Vayemer Hashem al Moshe Emor el hakoyanim, and then V'amarta aleim, first you speak to the Kohanim, the Gedolim, the adults, and then they will tell that to the children. It's more than that. It's not only that you tell them. Lahazir means you're careful. You're supervising it. You make sure. You ensure. Over here we're talking about purity and impurity, laws of impurity in relation to a kohen. And you should make sure that they're in a safe, sterile, so to speak, environment. We spoke last week about child safety. That means lahazir, hagdolim alaktanim, means not only just speaking. It means you have to take responsibility, that you make sure that they stay safe spiritually, that they don't become impure. And obviously, simply we're talking about kohanim, minors, so it's the responsibility of adults to take care of the health of children, so too the spiritual health of the children. Okay, that's the Pashto Pshat. Now, there's a Gemara in Yevomis that says that we learn out this idea. The Torah speaks about lahazir, to speak to the adults and tell them they should make sure about the children, which all the commentators say over here is a general statement about education. And the Torah tells us about three subjects, three times. One is in our Parshas Emor, which talks about how the Kohanim should not defile, become impure in relation to going to a funeral, etc., etc. Then there's another place where the Torah tells us about this, and that's concerning the prohibition of drinking blood, eating blood. And then there's a third place where the Torah tells us the prohibition of eating shkotzim, shrotzim, about not eating insects, creepy crawlies, etc. So the Gemara says, why does the Torah have to teach this lesson about Lahazik Gdolim Aktanim in 3 areas? And the Gemara gives an answer. In Likutei Sichas Chelik Zayin, the Rebbe explains why the answer, according to the Gemara, is we have to understand it, and he goes into at length over there more alpinigla, he gets more into the details according to halacha, etc., according to the sugi of that Gemara. But there are 2 letters that the Rebbe wrote in the 40s, and we see that this is a subject that was very close to the Rebbe's heart, and he speaks about it more b'derech drush, and it's so fascinating. We see it was a subject that's close to the Rebbe's heart, and it's talking to an educator. And the Rebbe interprets the 3 instances where you would think, enough's enough, I can't, it's too hard. Where you might have reservations as a teacher, as a parent, that maybe forget about it. When we talk about education, it was talking about in most cases, but there could be 3 situations, 3 cases that are exceptions. And therefore, the Torah let us know in these 3 cases, there are no exceptions. And this is so powerful to teachers. We struggle with this every single day. There are teachers that work very, very hard, and they try to come up with new ways to engage the students. And people are not sleeping nights, thinking up new ways and being creative and working on themselves and taking seminars and reading books, etc., to be more effective teachers, because it's so important to them. But nevertheless, still, they sometimes feel that they failed, and sometimes they'll say the reason why it didn't work was because there was some sort of flaw or some sort of exception, that by some students the rules don't work, the principles don't work. And here comes the Torah and gives us this lesson that means no exceptions. What are the 3 places? So the first place is, and therefore the lesson is not only in general concerning teachers, by the way. We're talking about being Mekarev another Yid, bringing them closer to Judaism. As the Rebbe would say, a cotton bishonim, there's someone who's small, a child who's a minor, but it also means a cotton yedias, someone who's a minor when it comes to knowledge, etc. So therefore, there are 3 cases, and there's in general 2 problems, by the way. Number 1, if somebody's a godly, he can ask himself, why do I have to lower myself to get involved in dealing with the ktanim? What's in it for me? Of course he knows that's what the Eibishter wants. But maybe maybe my job, calling me a godly, which means I'm a godly b'Torah, maybe I lose out of it, but I have to do it, I have no other choice. But if I get someone else to do it, maybe I should get someone else to do it, let's say. And second of all, the main problem is, will I be successful? There might be certain cases where I won't be successful. So therefore, the Torah tells us these 3 cases. We'll talk about the second issue first. And that is, what does it say concerning blood? Rashi brings it down also. It says concerning blood that there were Yidden that were shtufim bedam, which means that they were addicted to it. At that time in the world, when the Torah says don't drink blood, that was the norm. So someone could say, don't try to challenge the norm. Don't go away. Don't try to make the custom of the land to disappear. Sometimes you go to certain countries and they can have a certain culture, and the culture is deeply entrenched for years. Now you're going to come along and try to make a revolution. They wallowed in the blood. They were immersed in it. They were like somebody who's an addict, so to speak. So you might think that when do we say that we should educate in a case where they didn't have a pre-existing custom or a pre-existing way of life, which they look at it as who knows what. It could be it's a tradition by them. It's their culture, like we said before. So in such a case, I'm not going to start. I'll educate in other areas, but not about something like Rashi says, shtufim. They were totally immersed in it. Okay. And here we say no, that even when it comes to such a case, you have to teach them what the truth is, what the Torah says, and that it's not allowed, and this is what Hashem wants. That's one case. Then we have another case, we might think it's an exception, and that is when it comes to eating shkotzim, which it's brought down that nafshe shel adam kotzav behem, a normal person is repulsed by it. Eating insects, it's reprehensible. And there could be two issues over here. Number one, it's brought down in some Mefarshim that oiseh zeh rak lahachis as boirei. There's some people that they did it because they just are doing it in spite. They do it because they know that Hashem does not like it, and therefore they do it. That's one issue. In other words, we're dealing with somebody who's rejecting. We're dealing with somebody who's a rebel. Or, you could argue, just got to say, we're dealing with savages. We're dealing with people that are not civilized. So Bechalish can mention. So here too again, you could say, when we're dealing with a mensch, when I'm dealing with a civilized person, then I can talk to him. There's a certain edelkeit. There's a certain sensitivity there. There's a certain spiritual sensitivity there. There's a certain refinement. So with such a person I can deal with. But somebody who is so coarse, so insensitive, so primitive, so savage, it's very hard to deal with such a person. First, we have to try to make them much more refined. And then we can talk to them about finer things. But if they're completely animalistic, they're savages, how can I talk to them? How can I educate them? And especially if we learn, like we said before, that there are those that rak lahachis boirei, that they're doing it because they're rebelling or rejecting. That means they're totally not interested at all. They're running away. Here too comes the Torah and says, no, even when it comes to such a person, you still have to teach them, educate them, and teach them the truth. Then comes the third case, our parsha, which talks about the impurity tumen tara. So here's the same thing. Sometimes you can have a teacher, an educator say, you know what, when it comes to things that are logical, let's say mishpatim, the social justice of Torah, or even eidos, which are the testimonials that have an historical context. So those things I could talk about and I could try to convince somebody else. But if we're talking about things that are totally irrational, I don't want to speak about it. I'm uncomfortable educating things that are completely not in the realm of logic, completely out of this world. How could you explain Tum Tar? It's very difficult. And I know myself, some teachers, even when it comes to, they're completely observant and they do everything right, but they don't like to talk about subjects that are uncomfortable because it's too holy. It's too mystical. It's too otherworldly. They like to talk about things that a person could relate to. Teachers like to be winners. They want to sell what people are going to buy. But if the person is not a believer, I'm going to tell them that we believe in miracles and outright miracles and miracles that defy the laws of physics, that's already, that might be a bit difficult. So here again, the Torah says, no. When it comes to something which is completely illogical, so to speak, super irrational, so even there you have to teach them the truth, which is the Torah. So now, first of all, but why? What's the basis for all this? And therefore, first of all, this is the secret to Chabad activism. There are no exceptions. We accept every single Yid. And there's no such a thing as a lost cause, or a lost case, or a hopeless case. Every single person is redeemable. As we spoke many times with the Pasuk, Mayim Rabim L'Yuchel L'Chabes Es Ha'ava. As Chassidus explains, even the great flood cannot extinguish the spark. Every single Yid has that spark as neshama. And the famous halacha in Rambam, the famous law that when it comes to a divorce, that we're supposed to say we force him until he says I want. And the question is, what do you mean? He wants. He really doesn't want. It's just because you're forcing him, therefore he says he wants. And we say, no, he does want. It's only that, so to speak, the devil got the better of him. So in other words, according to halacha in the Rambam, Yitzra Yushatakve, this is Jewish law. Jewish law is that he has a spark and that he wants to do God's will. So when you go over to a Jew on the street and you ask him, do you want to put on tefillin? And he says no. And we tell him it's not true, you do want to put on tefillin. And he says, you're telling me what I want? Yes. And that's exactly the Jewish law, which is the Jewish reality. So since we look at every single Yid, that he has a neshama, a pintel Yid, that spark. So because of that spark, even when he's rebelling, the spark is still there. Even when he's acting like somebody who's completely coarse, and somebody who seems to be like as primitive and a savage, the spark is there. And even when it comes to something which is he says he doesn't believe, and so on and so forth, the spark is there, the neshama is there. Every single Yid has that neshama. We have to take the pilot light and ignite it so it should turn into a fiery flame. And that's why in every single case, there are no exceptions. That's number one. Number two, so therefore, in other words, there will be success to some degree, as we'll soon discuss in a second even more. Why? Because you really don't have to create anything new. If we would say you have to take a frog and turn him into a human, that would be something which is impossible for a normal person to accomplish. But if we're saying take the person who's a Yid and just bring it out, okay, it's there already. You just have to reveal it. Then comes the second thing. Why do you have to get involved? Are you going to lose anything? And over here, the Rebbe says a moedik vort connected to this lahazir hagdolim alaktanim. There are two things that Chassidus explains about the lahazir gdolim alaktanim. Number one, advice. You want that the teaching should be more successful? You want to see how you'll be more effective? The answer is lahazir hagdolim alaktanim. The word lahazir also comes from the word zohar. Zohar means to shine, to illuminate. That's why the Sefer Zohar is called Zohar. So lahazir, your teaching should be in a way of lichtigkeit. It's beautiful, it's exciting, it's inspiring. Besides, for some Mepharshim that say lahazir also means seklar. When something's shining, it's klar v'dezun, it's clear as the sun. In other words, daylight, you see everything and everything becomes clear. When you teach somebody something, and like he says, oh, until one day I saw the light. Things are so clear to me now. I was once confused. I was once mixed up, but now it's clear. So the lesson in teaching over here is two lessons in lahazir. Number one, clear. Be very clear. Teachers have to be very clear. And number two, lichtig, freilich, varim, positive, illuminating, inspiring, shining, incandescent. But now comes another word. Lahazir also is connected to Meir Einei Shnei Mavaya. There's a passage that says when the older person teaches the younger person, they both become illuminated. What happens is that when the mashpia lowers himself to the makabel, Hashem instituted a formula of imitamida yosemikulam. Harbe kebalti mi Rabboisai, much I receive from my teachers, more than that from my colleagues, but the most I receive from my students. And why is that? Hashem set up the system that when the teacher lowers himself to the students, the teacher will gain a level in the subject matter which will be greater, deeper, higher, broader, completely incomparable to whatever you came to before, to whatever you knew before. And that's why we say, Meir Einei Shnei Mavaya. Both of their eyes become illuminated, the teacher and the student, because the revelation that comes when the teacher, the mashpia, goes down to the student is a level of light, which in relation to that level of light, the teacher and the student are both equal. That's how great that level of light is. It reflects on the Ein Areich, how the light is so incomparable, exponentially higher than both of them, that both the teacher and the student are considered equal in relation to that light. So that's what the Torah is teaching us. Lahazir, teach in a way which is inspirational, as light and clear and lively and exciting and interesting, but also that through that you'll come to teacher and student will both be elevated to greater heights. But the real chiddush is that the teacher himself will become elevated like no other way as when he goes to teach the student. Let me connect it to a Mishnah. By the way, this month is called Chodesh Iyar, which is connected. It's explained that one translation of Iyar is connected to Ziv, which Ziv means also to shine. This week is Tuesday, as we said, like Boimer, is the day of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who wrote the Zohar, which is light. The whole idea of Pnimius HaTorah, the inner dimension of Torah, the Kabbalah, was to reveal a deeper light, the light that was never revealed before, which brings clarity, etc. In this week's Mishnah, Perek Daled, there's a Mishnah that says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, have a Zohar b'Talmud, sheshigas Talmud oile zodin. So the simple meaning means be very careful how you teach, for if you teach it wrong, or even when you study, so then terrible things can come out of it. Wanton transgression. That means oile zodin. But over here we could say again, have a Zohar b'Talmud. Make sure your study is clear, your teaching is clear, and also have a Zohar b'Talmud. Make sure your teaching is exciting and interesting and inspiring, especially in today's generation, where students, especially if you're going to teach them Torah, in a world with so many options, it's becoming more and more difficult every single day. So surely, we have to be careful to make the Torah the most exciting, the most inspiring, the most interesting, the most profound, etc., etc. Not dry, but the depth, the profundity, the beauty of Torah is all included in the words, have a Zohar b'Talmud. It should shine. Every single student should learn the Torah and say, wow, Shakespeare, Dickens, Tolstoy, Freud, Leonardo da Vinci, they're nothing compared to this. It's a busha. It's terrible that I should mention it in one breath, but this is really what every teacher should ask himself. Am I demonstrating to some extent or a fraction of what really the infinity of Torah and the beauty of Torah is all about? That's what I should be asking themselves. Every single teacher. Okay, now I'm going to talk about something that, it's very close to me. I'm in this business, and why this is so important, what we're talking about. First of all, the whole idea of Lahazar G'dolim L'Ketanim means that the G'dolim should take responsibility for the Ketanim. So in Hasidic Chabad history, there was something called the Elter Chassidim, Ziknei Anash, Ziknei Chassidim. Besides for this idea of Mashpia, so if you read the works of the previous Rebbe, this is going back hundreds of years, that there would be an old Chassid, and he would, the younger Chassid would become like an apprentice. I'm using it for lack of a better word. The older Chassid would really supervise and get involved in the life of the younger Chassid and overlook and make sure that he turned out all right. This is with Rashbatz and the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe talks about his teachers, Reb Nissen. But I'm going back to the Rashbatz and Michal Opotsky, if I remember correctly. There were stories and stories for hundreds of years how they would send a young chassid to an elder chassid, and then the elder chassid guided this young chassid. And that's how this chassid grew up to be, how he's meant to be. He has to have the instruction and the guidance, the mentorship of an older chassid. And this is very important. I cannot stress it enough, how I see it in my daily life, how the younger generation is not receiving a mentor, an advice from a mentor. And this is very important. So that's number one. Now I'm talking to the older people, that we have to have personalities where we reach out, we engage with younger people, with the youth. You have to realize something. Today we're living in times that the winds are blowing from all sides. You might be the person that this younger person relates to, and you might succeed when no one else has succeeded. So therefore you have to be accessible. And this is, I cannot underscore the importance of what I'm saying now. You have some chassidim that yichidim with the Rebbe, private audiences, or they had letters. They're keeping it close to the chest because it's very private. But really, I believe today, more than ever before, you have to reveal all the secrets, because it might save somebody. You have no idea. And one of my favorite stories that I've said many times is that after the Maggid, the musician Maggid, passed away, who was the second leader of the Hasidic movement, so there was a time happened that the Alter Rebbe was in his house, and he saw throngs of Hasidim coming towards his house. And he opened up the window and he looked outside and he said, "Oi, what do they want from me?" The shutters, he saw them coming towards his house. "What do they want from me?" And he closed the shutters of the window and he just sat down. And his Rebbetzin told him, "They willen hören, was du es gehört von Rebbe." They want to hear from you what you heard from the Rebbe. So he stood up, what you heard from the Maggid. In other words, what you heard from your teacher. So the Alter Rebbe stood up and said, "If that's the case, then I have what to say and to say." So this story always sends chills down my spine. Every single one of us has to give over what they heard from their father, what they heard from their grandfather. You don't understand how it's gold, how it's diamonds. And this could be precisely the antidote that could save that person's life. You have no idea. Whatever level he's holding, this thing could actually bring benefit. And it goes together, like I said, so much of us in the field, we have frustrations. I mean, obviously the positive outweighs the negative, but there's difficulties. Every job has its difficulties. So too teaching. So what you have to remember is we were told that every single investment brings return. There's a guarantee. And like we said before, it's because the spark is already there. The question is, how much return? That's a different thing. That's a separate thing. But there's nothing which is 100% waste. Every single time you made an investment, you put in your energies, you put in your time, you put in your effort. There will be some return. That's a guaranteed. We were promised. That's number one. Number two, the pasuk says, the planting that was done with tears, you will reap with joy. Similar idea. That's a promise. Put your blood, sweat, and tears, your love into it, your passion into it, your excitement into it, your happiness into it. And then Hazoirim Bedima represents you put yourself totally into it. Then there will definitely be return. So the Eibusher should help that even before, like Boimer, we should do our part. Hazoirim Bedima, invest, and keep on investing. There are no exceptions. You should be inspired. You should be inspired. You should be inspired and be able to inspire others. And the Eibusher's help that we should see return on all the investments. And the ultimate return will be that through our investments, we'll see the return of the Eibusher, of the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, taken from a Yad Mamish, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.